You're listening to the Practical Wealth Show with Curtis May, putting you in the driver's seat to control your finances. Let's start the Practical Wealth Talk about alternatives to Wall Street.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Curtis May. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Practical Wealth Show. And I have a special guest, a good friend of mine. His name is Patrick Donohoe, and he has a fantastic company called Paradigm Life, and he has an awesome new book out that I just finished a few weeks ago called Heads, I Win, Tails, You Lose. Okay. And so, Patrick, say hello to my listeners out there.
Hello, listeners. Hello, Curtis. What's up, man?
Hey. Pat and I, so I'll give you all a little inside scoop. So we taught me how to do this stuff that I'm doing right now. So when did we meet? Like 2009 or 10?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
It's funny because when I read the book, you go into a lot of personal stuff, and I guess I met you on the tail end of that.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that you were going, that you'd been through that tunnel. And it's just impressive and see, because part of the thing about entrepreneurship, you have to be able to, we don't have the luxury of having a bad day. You got to play hurts, and you've got to motivate yourself to take action regardless if you feel like crap or not.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people don't get that. You listen, my dad used to say, look, business and feelings don't have anything to do with each other. And so you got to, when your store is open, you got to go to work.
And it's hard because we're sentient beings, mm-hmm. and it's hard for circumstances not to affect our feelings and our emotions. And it's one of those, it's just one of those things that I learned through some hard times, which is understanding the nature of emotions and understanding how you can have more influence on them instead of outside circumstances. And it really comes down to how you position those outside circumstances and what you define them as. And, a lot of the book goes through just the importance of taking advantage of life. And oftentimes people, will not take risks or will not pursue this, that, or the other because they're afraid. And I think fear is one of those emotions that has been taught to us as just human beings, mm-hmm. As a negative thing. But I think fear and some other emotions are signals really to understand the meaning behind them. And I think that's one of the keys to, being successful in business, as you put it, is to understand context of emotions and being able to, really position yourself so that you're in control as opposed to letting the outside world control you, which I think is the case with most people.
Yeah. I think I was telling somebody in business, and I've said this to my kids, nothing in of itself is good or bad. It's all in how you react to it. But that emotional intelligence is hard. Mm-hmm. But it's a muscle that can be developed.
For sure. And that's where I think the stronger you feel about that reality, because it's a reality. And once you accept the reality and understand its purpose, then the more you're able to really seek out those type of circumstances and react in an abundant positive way. Like you said, you build, there's this nature of neural pathways and how you develop habits. And there's this wrapping to those nerves called myelin. And the myelin, is actually one of those things that reinforces and insulates, whatever that belief or understanding is. So I think the more you do it and the more profound the experience, the stronger you are, which will just be added upon in the future. So I was, in hindsight, it sucked at the time, but in hindsight, it was a tremendous blessing to me because I was able to withstand, some other difficult situations and work through them and ultimately wind up on top of it.
So long story short, go back because he has a phenomenal business and helping lots of families introduce them to what he calls the perpetual wealth strategy within his firm. But talk about how you kind of got into the business, progressed through it. And then I want to kind of talk about that strategy and then what you're trying to help your clients and the readers understand as we go through different chapters of the book.
Sure. Yeah. The story goes back to 2005, 2006, where, within probably a year, 18-month period of time, I met Kim Butler and also Garrett Gunderson, and learned about what they were doing. Frankly, I didn't really know what they were doing. I knew that they were really passionate about what they were doing, and you could tell that they had this conviction about it. And that was something that I would say was lacking with what I was doing at the time, which was just shortly after I graduated from college. And so I became really fascinated with it, started studying it, and ultimately started Paradigm Life doing the same thing that they were doing in 2007. But it was different because the company, the partnership in which I created Paradigm Life was virtual. So we didn't meet with people one-on-one. We did a lot of our work over the internet through webinars. And so that's where I saw a big opportunity. But then, of course, obviously 2008, 2009 hit. And long story short, the partnership broke up. I dealt with, some of that fallout financially. Didn't have the greatest time there, but learned some valuable lessons. And then I was about to get out of the business. I was, my wife was putting a lot of pressure on me to, find a job. And there were instances where she told me, like, I'm going to put an application at 7-Eleven in for you. So we can actually earn something,
right?
But I kept, I kept pushing.
Been there.
And I didn't tell that story in the but it didn't cross my mind not to. Yeah. So basically, I reconnected with Kim and Todd in 2009, toward the end of 2009, and that trend with Nelson Nash as well, and started going to more conferences and really understand. I was driven to understand what I was doing as a business, and that kind of reaffirmed some things in my mind in relation to what I was doing, why I was doing it, and I know that's kind of where the bug was reinvigorated.
And so, for our listeners, the thing is, he mentioned Nelson Nash was around that time. We were all learning. We're still doing it. The Nelson Nash's book, Become Your Own Banker, showing people how to create their own, what we call it, privatized banking systems using permanent insurance. Would you?
Yeah. It's just that I would say in just the simplest form, it's giving your money to an insurance company rather than a banker or a financial institution.
Okay.
And so giving money to an insurance company has all sorts of benefits. And, they were highlighted in a number of books. Kim has Live Your Life Insurance. Garrett Gunderson wrote Killing Sacred Cows. And of course, Nelson Nash's book, but you also have a few others. And so I really started to understand it at a deeper level. Mm-hmm. And Todd, who's Kim Butler's husband, he has a software program called Truth Concepts. And I went to their training, which was about every other month, religiously for a couple of years to really understand at the core, the resources I had access to, but also, the ways in which I could help individuals. And at the time, we were still 2008, 2009, and we were in the aftermath of the financial crisis, but help individuals to learn from what happened and divert savings, divert their wealth management to private mutual insurance companies, as opposed to relying on, what got them into trouble in the first place, which is the typical financial planning model. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. It was just kind of that up and down and up and down. And, now the up and downs have been more, in relation to business and scaling business and, reaching a broader audience. But it's been an awesome journey to know. And obviously with, what we believe in, knowing that what we do every single day really does make a difference. And I think that is something I take, for granted often, but it's one of those things where I believe people are really pursuing, a meaningful career. And to have that every single day means a tremendous amount to me.
Yeah, I think it's powerful when your vocation becomes your invocation.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and so that's how I feel. I'm very crusade oriented. So, because I came from the, buy term invest the difference world, right? So when I discovered this, and I indirectly discovered it from Kim also, and I was like, what's that story in the Bible? Saul from Tarsus, I became Paul. Like I went blind for 3 days. I was like, what? And I went in this research mode, and now I'm pissed that I'm just discovering this like 15 years in the financial industry. Cause I started at, 20? And when I originally got got into the business, and I'm laboring under the wrong ideas and I'm upset. And why did I not know this? And so I am adamant about people knowing this because it literally is life-changing stuff. To me, we have the cure for financial cancer. So we have to tell it. That's powerful. So, I'll tell you this publicly. I appreciate it because I didn't know how to do this. I'd read the book, but I was like, all right, well, okay. I didn't know what companies were product, you know what I mean? I just didn't know. And then learning how to do it virtually. That's how I learned how to do it. So we work virtually. You learned it from Kim. I learned it from you. And that has been a game changer for my business also. So
no, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I look at, the typical way in which people are managing money. And right now things are seemingly good on the surface. And that's a hard time for us.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's been, quite some time, 10 years-ish, since there was some disruption to financial markets in which people were questioning things. It's one of those things where I value the understanding of principles, understanding how to do a financial strategy with economics-based understanding as opposed to speculation, and that kind of keeps that confidence going. But still, it's one of those necessities. Because the overwhelming consensus is that financial planning and diversification and, retirement plans and just the notion of retirement is still, the predominant attitude of people. But, it's one of those things where, we have good times and we have ups and downs. And, I would say the cyclical nature of the market usually gives people signals as to what they should be focused on. So, looking at a potential, disruption to the markets in the near future, will most likely happen. And, at that time, I think our message is strong enough, collectively, what you're doing, Curtis, what Kim is doing, what Garrett is doing with Wealth Factory. I mean, there's a lot of different groups out there that I believe are kind of forming a foundation so that once there is market disruption, then people will know where to turn.
Right, exactly. And I think that the way you take an educational approach, because, as Nelson always says, if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. Because we're really not teaching anything new. We're really helping people rediscover what people used to do.
But it's one of those things where I look at history and there's typically the negative events in the past are what people remember, not the positive side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's lots of evidence of how, the principles that we use today were used in the past. It comes down to the notion of the present, here and now, and the perspective people have and how it relates to their well-being in the future. And people don't usually look historically to determine what's going to help them in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's obviously so many different examples of ways in which our future can improve if we understood what history is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those ideas where, I tried to make the case in the book that the whole notion of, retirement was not in line with what people were truly trying to achieve. I used the theme that, most human beings, probably all human beings are driven by the desire to be free as opposed to the desire to retire.
Right.
And so the notion of freedom, I believe can be accomplished and should be accomplished as soon as possible, as opposed to this, dream of retirement, which I don't think is realistic, right? Because retirement, you've probably commented on this before, retirement is not in line with what human nature is.
Right.
Part of freedom and part of a fulfilling life is to take who you are and be of benefit to somebody else in whatever capacity that may be. But to retire, you remove the environment to be able to do that. And that eats away at your life. It eats away at your vitality. And I think, it leads to an early grave in many instances. So the idea is trying to figure out a way to, number one, define what financial independence or financial freedom is, mm-hmm. and try to get there as soon as possible. And I believe, one of those variables is discovering, meaningful work and finding something that you get paid to do, but you love doing. The economy and society today have so many different opportunities that are in line with what people would want to do, whether they were paid or not. And it just comes down to the environment of having to seek it out and believing that it's possible and understanding the context of why you're pursuing that. And then, then it's going out and seeking it. But there's tons of opportunities today to accomplish and achieve that.
mean, you said an interesting point where they can be good stewards of their resources now than if they can become financially independent. I always tell clients, being able to live like, I use the Jim Rome definition, be able to live like you want to live from the income from your personally invested assets, right? And, that are more than your expenses. So now you're financially free, which is what people want. Because I'll do workshops and say, well, look, how many of y'all want to become financially independent? Their hands will go up. I said, well, tell me what that means to you. And they'll say, well, I'll be out of debt. Now I want my own business. And none of that's financial independence. And so I'll define it, like I said, because if you define it, because you want to be free. Dan Sullivan says there's two types of freedom. There's freedom from, and there's freedom to.
Yeah, there's the definition of liberty, which is freedom from, and then freedom, which is freedom or ability to do. But it's an interesting point because I look at financial independence. I don't think that's at least in my experience, it's not a definition that's calculated by a number or an investment. It's a mindset. Because if you look at, really where the most amount of certainty is for people, right, it's in their ability to get a job and get paid for what they do.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
If they, in that, right, but you ultimately become dependent on an employer for somebody else to pay you. And so going from being dependent on an employer to going to being dependent on, income-based investments or cash flow-based investments, you're still dependent.
Right.
So I've seen people that, have tons of passive income, but they're not independent. And it comes down to a mindset. And so the idea, and this is how I've, at least studied and interpreted definition of financial freedom or financial independence for me is, to know that you have a financial statement where you don't necessarily have to work. And that comes to your investments and the nature of your investments. But then also part of it is having the ability to create value for other people using who you are, whether it's being a consultant or it could even be working for a company. Right. But it's working for a company that you like going to, that you like being around, you like the environment, and it's healthy and it's empowering. There's a lot of people that find tremendous fulfillment in the company that they work for. I wish there was like this equation that every human being can follow. But I think the litmus test is a gut check or a mindset check to see if you describe your circumstances as being independent or being free.
That's good stuff. So, and one of the things you talk about, I guess we'll jump around a little bit, as financial, whatever we are, consultants, whatever, we don't have the ability, we don't make people financially independent. We can give them some strategies, some systems, but really, your number one asset, your number one investment. And so from your standpoint, what does that mean to you?
Well, it kind of goes to one of the points I just made, which is, the most amount of certainty is your ability to go out and get a job, right? Which I believe is an asset, because what that means is that somebody finds you valuable and is willing to pay you money for it. So if that's the case wherever it's at right now, because you have a whole spectrum of compensation, right? You have people in the United States that make hundreds of millions of dollars individually. Then you have people that are on minimum wage.
Right.
Okay? So if you start to correlate money not as something that you just get or are entitled to, but if you look at money as to the proof that you're valuable. Now, if it's a minimum wage value, it is what it is. It's still value. But if you want to get more money, then you have to figure out a way to be even more valuable. And that comes down to, number one, understanding what is the actual exchange. And then if you don't feel it's an equitable exchange, then it's going out and seeking, another employment or another job or a position. And then it's, the certification or education or work that's required to actually get into that position. But right now, you could go and look at the job description of somebody that makes $1 million a year, which could be, Fortune 100 CEO or Fortune 500 CEO. Then you can look at all their different accreditations and their experience. So if you want to do that, the list of what you have to do is out there. Right. Now it comes down to the path where you're at right now to the path where but I don't know most people that want to be, a corporate level CEO. It's a freaking miserable job, right? But at the same time, that's me. It could be a dream job for somebody. But the idea is like really starting to make those connections, right? Between here's me, I'm getting paid for something. If I want to get paid more, then I have to go create more value. And in order to do that, then investing in myself, getting education around whatever the service or the career is, okay, then there's a lot of different pathways to do that. But in the end, I would say, if that's the only driver, I think most people will hit a brick wall, which is they could get paid a lot of money, but they're not in a fulfilling environment or job, or it's something that they're not passionate about doing. And I believe that in order to achieve financial independence, you're going to have to confront that wall, figure out really what is that career, what is that thing that I get paid a lot to do, but I'm also receiving a ton of fulfillment and understanding and passion from the nature of doing it. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's like I've heard said your income is in direct proportion to the value that you bring to the marketplace. And you all have the ability to make yourself more valuable by what you watch, read, listen to, hang out with, or as what Garrett said, I think at our workshop, your mindset, your skill set, and your network, which you can do on purpose. And I know for me, like most of the growth in our business have not come from things we've put money into, but me investing in Curtis.
That's the biggest, and dude, that's always going to be the best return.
Yeah.
Okay? But here's what it comes down to is, it typically requires time. And so that's a thing that, passive investments don't require, which is it doesn't require much time. So there's always a balance there. But again, as I said before, right, it's not this, a focus in one area versus another area. Okay. I look at it as, the most important thing to focus on is you investing in you, trying to earn as much money as possible in something that you are receiving fulfillment from. Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing is, having a financial foundation, which I won't get into right now, but the foundation is of reserves. It could be your estate plan. It could be asset protection, whatever, depending on, where you're at in life. But it's basically the litmus test there is something, if you can't sleep at night, or if you're, you get out of bed because you're stressed out about money, okay, the financial foundation is essentially what gets you to sleep really well at night. So that's the second, second leg of the stool. And the final is, passive income type of investments, but it's also the financial education of what you're doing.
Yes.
It's not just investing in some guy because he, seems like he knows what he's talking about, right? It's understanding where your money is going and understanding the mechanics of the particular investment, right? But first and foremost, like you're going to have the highest rate of return, right? And you're going to always, be able to do more and learn more and be more valuable. So it's kind of an infinite pursuit, not something that ends at 65.
Yes. And so, because you can always grow and you have to be green and growing. And that's everything. I mean, I have people that haven't picked up a book since high school, or it's, I don't even let people, and I don't even hardly let people work with me. I give them homework of books they have to read. So where we do our version of, and we talk about next, perpetual wealth strategy, or and I need you to understand it, and so I always tell people, look, it's your money. It's not Curtis's money, right? So it can't be more important to me than it is to you. So this is a partnership. You got homework. I want you to understand this stuff. I might be brilliant. Don't do stuff because I said. That makes me uncomfortable, right? Because you need to pull your own little red wagon. So, Patrick, tell us about the second chapter of the book is a foundational chapter, which is the perpetual wealth strategy. Let's talk about that.
Well, there's a number of components to it, but the primary is that you shift your assets away from banks, investment financial institutions, and you put it into private mutual insurance companies. So the nature of doing this, okay, isn't because insurance companies provide better returns. It's not because there's stronger companies per se, okay, but it's the nature by which you do it. Because if you look at where money is put into a bank, or money is put into an investment or financial institution like a mutual fund company and so forth, okay, you're doing that for a particular purpose, right? The investment side of it is you're investing and deferring money for use in the future. Okay. As far as a bank is concerned, it's very short-term transactional because you don't earn any interest on it.
Right.
Okay? So the notion of putting money with a private mutual insurance company is, number one, the degree of certainty that you have associated with what your money will be in the future. Mm-hmm. Okay. But also it's the notion of being able to have liquidity, which means access and use of the money right now. And if agreeing with some of this philosophy associated with the pursuit of financial independence, that is not why IRAs and 401ks and mutual funds were created. Okay. Those type of investments were very long-term investments meant for the future. Okay. Looking at a private mutual insurance company, they have the characteristics and dynamic of being used in the present, but also the future. And not just, the future when you're older, but also bequeathing or transferring your wealth and assets to the next generation. So it's kind of one of those, institutions that if you set up your accounts the right way, they play a vital role in all stages of your life. So that's where the perpetual wealth strategy starts, where you essentially are storing your wealth and managing your wealth with private mutual insurance companies, as opposed to the alternatives.
When you say, so one of the chapters starts out with question everything.
Yeah, I mean, I feel people delegate their financial well-being to others. I've certainly been guilty of that. And in most cases, and if it hasn't happened yet, it probably will happen. But if you're delegating the well-being of your wealth to somebody else, then it's not a good representation of your stewardship, because first and foremost, you're the one that created the money, and you're the one that worked for it, and it reflected, the value you brought to the world. And giving that to somebody else, in a sense, invalidates the notion of money, because unless you have financial education around it, unless you understand what's going on. And that's where I would say asking questions really comes into play. And those questions, are in relation to where you're storing your money. And that's why we prefer, private mutual insurance companies, not because of their insurance companies, it's because of the mission and the principles and the values they have. And comparing that to the alternatives, okay, their mission aligns with my mission. Okay, their principles align with my principles. Okay, the notion of the company actually having a fiduciary responsibility to be profitable, but then distributing those profits to me, okay, also aligns with me, as opposed to the predominant ways in which Americans store wealth, which is in banks and financial institutions, where those principles, don't align with me and what I want for my life. Right. So as far as the questioning side of things is concerned, it's your stewardship. This is your money. You worked for it. You have a stewardship over ensuring that it's not squandered, and ensuring that it goes to the most efficient uses, which is the nature of economics.
I love that, because I tell people, look, you worked for it. It's not good stewardship to think that you can send your money 1,000 miles away to some fund manager you never met and think they're going to care more about it than you did. And but the whole industry trains you that you're not smart enough, you don't have the time, you don't have the temperament to personally manage your own money. Mm-hmm. So in so many words, their whole strategy is give your money to us. Your philosophy is, look, and I tell the same thing. It's like, listen, you are smart enough. It's not 2 + 2 is 4. It's not that complicated.
And honestly, if what I would recommend in that circumstance, is to do nothing with money. I mean, it's better off in your mattress, right? Instead of speculating.
Yes.
Right. So for me, really the whole idea of questioning is to be aware and to understand and have stewardship over what value you've brought to the world. And I think if people started to do that, they would ask better questions. They'd ask different questions. They just ask questions, right? So that they understand as opposed to trusting. And I would say for the most part, that's kind of the definition of gambling, where you put money into something and you want something in return, but you haven't done anything for it.
That's awesome. Boy, I could talk to you all day long. I know we need to wind down. So I'm looking at, and see, one of the great things about Pat's book is that it, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, is that you have a study guide, basically a website that goes with it, with videos, with resources, with you talking, links to other trainings, other books, other articles, which is a phenomenal learning piece.
It's one of those, it's hard to fit. There's so much that I wanted to say in the book, but it just wasn't the right medium to do it. Mm-hmm. And there's so much other, whether it's book recommendations or it's even parts of the book that were taken out, or things that I alluded to in there, but it would have been just too complicated and would go over people's heads. And so Just the study guide itself, just the technology that exists today where you can house just tons of information in an easy way. That's what we decided to do for the book. So instead of me feeling bad about stripping this part or stripping that part, like everything that I had put into it, essentially is found within the book, obviously the core parts. And then the rest is in that online study guide, which you can access for free.
Oh, so much I want to go. All right. So we have to do another part 2. Let's talk about, so I love chapter 10, save, borrow, invest, and build wealth, which is a kind of the utilization of the foundation, which is the perpetual wealth strategy. Is that a good descriptor?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's a sequence. It's a sequence, and it's meant to be done in order. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just you wake up tomorrow morning and you do all of that, mm-hmm. right? The first sequence is to have a good systematic way of putting money aside, okay, mm-hmm. which is the nature of savings. And then savings has some characteristics which we've just gone through as far as storing wealth with a mutual insurance company. But that, is not what's going to make all your dreams come true. Mm-hmm. So then it's borrowing. And so the nature of borrowing, I believe, is one of those other just misunderstood concepts that's out there. Mm-hmm. And borrowing is seen, and rightfully so, but it's seen as a very negative thing. We're just taking on debt. But I look at borrowing, and it's the backbone of our entire economy because we're in a debt-based economy. Right. And so, but the difference is it's what the debt is used for. Most people associate debt with consumption. Okay. And I agree that is not a wise use of resources, which is paying interest, which is essentially marking up the price of what you're paying for. Right. So the notion of debt, right, is really to understand leverage. And the nature of leverage is essentially putting money into an investment, whatever it may be, okay, with other people's money. And so that's one of the characteristics of these insurance companies is not only will they give you a safe place to store your wealth, they'll pay you a dividend. On top of that, a very reliable rate of return. They will also give you a line of credit or a loan against that growing balance. And that line of credit can be used. You can use it for consumption, but the book really talks about how to use that as a tool to grow your wealth. And I would say using, loans as far as personal or professional development is an investment in you. But now you have some accountability associated with getting a return on that investment. Right. So if you put, you take out a loan for $10,000 to go to, a marketing conference, you have a loan outstanding on your financial statement. Now you still have your $10,000 that's, continuing to grow, but the responsibility associated with paying that back now creates a measure of accountability where you can take that investment and start to look at ways in which you can make more money in order to pay back the investment first and return the capital that gave you that knowledge in the first place. So it provides, that's just an example of professional development, but it provides you capital to be able to, enhance your investments, whether that's you or whether that's, another external type of investment.
Like real estate or notes or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And I would caution, it's one of those parts of the book that I want people to understand is that, there are lots of different investments out there. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I would say we're in a very interesting period of time because most investment people, especially the ones recently that I've come across, weren't around prior to 2008 and 2009. And so without, hardships, understanding how economies fluctuate, investments, you really have to have the financial education to ask the right questions, understand financials, understand collateral, even understand the nature of the actual underlying business that administers an investment. Right. Because oftentimes the product and investment itself may make all the sense in the world, but the people that manage it jack it all up. And so asking questions about people, asking questions about business structure and so forth is vital. And that really starts with, educating yourself.
Dude, I just learned that the hard way.
A lot of people learn that the hard way. And if you haven't learned and you don't understand the nature of the investment, you're going to learn.
Right. Right,
at
exactly.
some point.
And and when in doubt, don't. But because even when you use the mutual companies to access your capital, if you got to take risk, well, it gives you a level, because if oh, look, I'm getting 4 or 5% here, if I can't make at least that, then I don't need to touch it, because I'm already got it here making money safely. I like the discipline part that you've got to, because see, a lot of people don't treat their capital as if it has a cost. I was talking to a family last night, and the husband just couldn't get the concept of you finance everything you buy.
Yeah.
Well, you mean I pay cash? It's like, yeah, but if you, I said, look, if you have $5,000 and you draw it down to 4, I said, how do you get it back to 5? Oh, I got to save it. I said, well, you got to make deposits. Well, that's a payment. Same thing. Okay. But you don't put it back with interest. I said, so you cheat yourself all the time. And so it's like, it's funny because we're sliding in sophisticated economic principles that are basic, but opportunity costs, and we're sliding human life value, just things that we're putting into giving to regular people and affluent people's hands that are just making them more efficient, more, what's that word, anti-fragile.
Yeah.
So
well, it's one of those. Yeah, it's an understanding of a financial statement, right? An understanding, accounting 101. Because if you look at opportunity cost, it's a profound principle, and you'll see that most corporations, they understand it, and maybe not the upper echelon, even the upper echelon, the C-level people, but the CFO understands it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the accounting team understands it. Okay, because when you allocate money to one area, then you can't allocate it to another, and because you can't allocate it to another, okay, you have to account for that. And so that is why, you have companies that do a lot of that. And there's actually some tax benefits to doing that at the corporate level, not at the personal level, but the principle is the same. And so the nature of where money goes, it always could have done something else. And financially, it's measurable, right? Because tonight I could spend time with my family, right? And or I can stay here at the office and do work, right? So if I look at the trade-off, there's a trade-off, and I can't measure the amount of happiness I would have had with my family. Okay, I might be able to measure how much productivity I had here. Okay, but from a pure financial standpoint, when you're making that trade-off with money, you can measure it. You can measure the trade-off by the amount of interest you would have earned, and that's where I would say, people have just been spun sideways with the notion of debt, right, and been told that interest is evil, and I just look at the decisions people make, and they're not getting ahead. And it's funny, dude. It's seriously, if you think about it, like, because people aren't using leverage, okay, they immediately lose, because everything's priced with leverage. Okay, all corporations, I mean, look at the amount of bond holdings corporations have. It's enormous, and that's allowed them, to grow. But also, that's included in the price that you pay for things. Right. But yet, if you get out of debt, okay, and you don't have things leveraged, you immediately lose, right? Because the value of using debt could have assets that are a lot higher and cash flows a lot higher than they would have been. And I don't want to get into the complexity of that, but if you really understand, economics, which is difficult. I didn't understand it. Even getting a degree in economics, I didn't understand it, and it's still very complex. But if you understand the notion, right, of a debt-based society and economy, then you'll realize that everything we pay for, whether it's our internet service, whether it's our car, everything has been priced in debt. And if you're not using debt as part of your strategy to grow your wealth, then you're immediately losing. Because because people don't understand the economy, which people think is doing great, but it sits on top the financial system, which is a debt-based system. And so you have to learn how to get on the receiving side of interest. We're always on the paying side of interest. And so when you look at, you've got the bank on one side, you've got the producer, the business, and you got the consumer, but the bank makes money off of both, but the producer passes on interest to the consumer. So now you're paying the bank and the producer. But if you're just buying stuff, as Rich Dad calls it, doodads, and you're just saving
and you're saving dollars. So you're saving debt. And so you see $1 million, but it buys $200,000 worth of stuff because we have a flexible currency that they're telling you that we're going to every 36 years, you got to make twice as much money, right? Because they want a 2% inflation rate. And it's,
that's why, in the book, I use calculations.
Mhm.
I tried to do it. I mean, I revised that thing like 1,000,000 times just so it was the simple to understand. But the rhetoric that's out there, the commonly held beliefs associated with, growing money and then distributing it as as retirement, it is just not possible. Like it's not. It's not possible because of the devaluation of money. Anyway, it's one of those things where I have some anxiety about the future because
Mhm.
I feel people have been set up in a losing game, and that's one of the reasons for the title of the book, right? Is to put yourself in the position where you win no matter what.
So as we wind down, because see, that's major. And so what he does in the book is, I know we're maybe geeking out a little bit on economics, but but in the book, it's really what is the simplicity to it, numbers, examples that you can understand, and understanding this stuff is major. And your kids understanding this stuff is major. And so, I learned a lot and also learned, just better ways to say it. As I have a mentor, Don Blanton, says, it's not what you know, what you can communicate. Mm-hmm. So I'm always looking, reading, trying to get better at how can I take this concept and make it simpler? Because a confused mind does nothing. It's not about how smart Curtis is. It's about, or Patrick is what you understand, because at the end of the day, it's your money.
But that's a signal, man. It's one of those things where the signal is, if you don't understand it, it's a huge opportunity, because now you can go out and learn something that's applicable to you, because everything we've been talking about is applicable to most people. Well, especially those that are listening to a podcast and are actually going out of their way to educate themselves. I mean, it's your listeners say tells me a lot about them based on the fact that they're just listening to a podcast on money.
Right.
But the idea is, if you don't understand it, go and seek out ways to understand it. And that is going to put you, ahead of the game, because don't rely on us. I mean, maybe we will talk about these things, but both of us would agree to not base your decision on, what we know, but base the decisions on what you know. And that education is more prevalent today than ever before, as far as understanding how money works, as far as understanding a debt-based economy, as far as understanding, leverage, interest rates. They've made it very, very simple. They meeting media, they meeting YouTube, and a lot of the outlets that provide lots of education through various mediums.
And so I know tell me what you're reading now. Because he's all, and we're gonna shut it down, because I almost shut down after that last conversation. But give us, for those of you, we've been talking. I've got a page of notes, so you've been to really listen to this thing, because he's dropped some value bombs on your head throughout this whole conversation. So tell them what you're reading, and then once you tell them where to get the book, and tell them about your because Patrick has an awesome podcast.
Yeah, so I don't read just kind of like one book at a time. Okay. But I just finished reading for a second time a book called Language and the Pursuit of Happiness, which is freaking amazing. And then I have this other one. It's called The Last Word on Power, which is about leadership and teamwork, which is like a mind bender. Mm-hmm. And then also I'm reading the Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. On the docket, just so people get a laugh, I have Discovering the Mind of a Woman by Ken Nair.
Okay.
I was referring that to a buddy.
Right. Good luck with that. That's
a chuckle. Yeah. Well, it's I have an amazing wife, and so my buddy was like, yeah. This really kicked
Which
me.
I finally got to meet. I didn't get a chance to talk to her that much. We were at the conference together, but I finally got to meet her. But we were always going from hither and thither, so I didn't get a chance to really talk to her that much. So I look forward.
Oh yeah, dude, she's amazing. I've taken her through
so that's good stuff. And your kids were there too, weren't they?
Yeah. I got 3. Yeah, so we got an almost 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and then a 4-year-old.
Okay, that is fantastic. Pat, listen, I could talk to you all day, and I appreciate you sharing with our listeners. So tell them where to find your stuff and where to
Sure.
tell them about your show.
Sure. So the book website is headsortailsiwin.com. And that's where you can access study guide. I think you can get like the ebook for like $1 or something like that there if you want to kind of check it out. And then there's links to the audiobook, links to Amazon to buy the actual book, and then you can get the study guide on the same website. And then the podcast is thewealthstandard.com. And yes, I've been doing that forever. That's kind of a fun thing, but it's definitely, I don't know, you're doing one right now, obviously.
Yeah,
So
Listen, he's the one that told me to do this in 2011, and I was like, what's a podcast?
I know. Well, that was the first, when I started doing it in 2007, right? Or maybe it was before, I think we were doing it before I started Paradigm. We were doing it on like an AM station that we had wired into our office, and my assistant was this like young guy, and he was like, yeah, we should do a podcast. I'm like, I had no idea, no clue what it is. Most people still don't have a clue what it is.
Right. I have to tell people, so let me see your phone, and then I got to go to Google Play or the App Store and download Word for them and say, all right, now look up the Practical Wealth Show, and I've been single-handedly just introduce people to podcasting and making them, so let's start with my show and then I'll add a few more to it. So I'm manually growing my listeners just by brute force.
Well, it's an amazing, it's an amazing platform to just, speak your mind and get the word out. And I love it. I mean, I get to interview some cool people and get to talk about stuff that I want to talk about. Sometimes, I just go on little tirades but that's where it's like the it's still the wild west if you think about it.
Yeah, you and me both. Listen, man, I thank you for your time today. I thank you for sharing these serious knowledge bombs with my listeners. Folks, go out, get the book. It really help you. You have to, I tell our clients, you have to read a book a month at least. You already said, here are the books I'm reading. I'm reading like 3 books right now. So you have to, you got to expect, because that is what's going to grow your revenue and help you be more secure. Security is the ability to produce. It doesn't lie in a job. Because I always tell people.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where as we've been talking, you make the connection between what and the value you can create for others, and then the remuneration of that value. Right. It's like, that's why I read all the time, because there's so much that I like suck at, but it's vital to whether it's business or whether it's what I provide for clients or what I provide for my family. Right. There's never, if you can make that connection and believe that there's never going to be an end, right, to what you can learn and the value you can create, then even if you read a book and you get 2 things out of it, it's just those 2 things can change your life. Books have changed my life. Yeah,
a change. I heard him mention say, change viewpoint can change your life. That's kind of what Prosperity Economics has done for me. Listen, thank you. And so, guys, go out there, make it a prosperous day. And thank you again for listening to the Practical Wealth Show. Thank you, Patrick. So make sure you go get his book, listen to his awesome podcast, listen, like, and share. Leave us a review. Y'all take care and have a great day. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks for listening to Practical Wealth. To access the show notes and resources, go to practicalwealthshow.com. To get your questions on the show, go to practicalwealthshow.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any investment decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Practical Wealth. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.